Hello, everyone, and welcome to Plate Stack Chat, especially you, Jake, who's been patiently waiting for us to begin. Well, here we are. My name is Jason, and just in case it's your first time here, what I like to do is get some great guests and bring them on for a fun chat. And recently, I've been getting a lot of our friends from the United Grid League on the show, and they've been some pretty fun shows, so why stop now? So let's meet our guests. First up, as I said, we've been discussing grid a lot on the show recently and probably getting a lot of it wrong. So we called in the big gun, a man whose name I think I've said wrong on every show that I've mentioned Grid League, but hopefully today we can put an end to that. When he is not on the grid, bringing order to chaos, you can find him trying to do the same on social media by explaining movements, team sport concepts, or just addressing some of the more ridiculous comments left by people. Please welcome the commissioner of United Grid League himself, Mava Wiswall.
Great pronunciation.
You know what happened is I thought so much about getting Mava right that I forgot completely about your surname. And then I was like, oh.
No, you nailed it. You're good to go.
Perfect. Good to go. Now, I definitely want to talk about some of the comments you've responded to on Instagram, because I think that's very interesting.
Okay.
But before we get to that, we've got to bring out our second guest. Now, while you will not see her competing out on the grid, you will definitely see her, as she is clearly going for the title of Best Dressed on the live stream. And not only will you see her, but you will also hear her, whether that's commentating on the races or interviewing the athletes. And just to complete the package, you can also catch her competing in Olympic lifting. So she doesn't just talk about other people lifting heavy things, but does it herself too. Please welcome one of the wonderful voices that keeps us company on the live stream. It is, of course, the one and only Cassie Martinez.
Wow, thank you. That was like so nice.
My job is done. That's, Woo. I say every time, that's as much effort as I put into the show.
Oh, that was the most
from here on, it's down to you guys. I sit back. I've realized recently when I've been clipping the reels that I've really gotten kind of relaxed on the show. I'm leaning further and further back in my chair. Okay. We've got already lots of people. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So we've got Jeffrey's here. Hello, Jeffrey. Paul is apparently at the gym, but he's also watching, keeping an eye on Cassie, I believe.
Hi, Paul.
Holly, I don't know.
Jake, we'll get back to you soon. We saw that email come through. So
yeah, so Jake now, is eager to start the UK Grid League. I'm excited for this. I'm angling to see if I can get Cassie's job working with Jake. So that's let's see. How are you both, by the way? First of all, let's start with the pleasantries.
I'm stoked. I'm excited to be here. Like I said before, I'm a big fan of yours, Jason, and I'm excited.
Me feel weird
and Cassie,
to
obviously,
hear you say
as well.
that.
So.
Well, we're all fans of Cassie.
I'm excited to be here too. We've been, communicating for the last few years, doing grid, and excited to just talk to you about it finally in person.
Yeah.
As much as this is.
Yeah, it is weird, isn't it? Because it's like, oh, it's nice to finally talk to you face to face, and yet it's still for a screen.
Right.
Yeah. But it's progress. One day we'll be there. Either you'll be over here for the UK Grid exhibition that Jake's putting on. That will be exciting. Or maybe, Jake and myself will find a way to get to Vegas, and then we'll come to one of these big, big opportunities there. Who knows? 2025
that would be amazing.
Or 6.
We would love to have you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my budget at the moment is not there, but who knows? Let's see. We live in hope. That, the bigger grid comes, the better for me, I think, at this point.
Exactly.
Now, I've got to check something here. Mavi, you're not controlling the Grid League YouTube comments. No, okay. All right. Because I was thinking, man, this guy is good.
No, I'm not that good.
Yeah. Okay. So you're both good. That's excellent. I've got some. Where do we even begin? Have you heard some of the shows we've had recently about grid? Because I know we've made some mistakes. We said 4.5 minutes for a ladder match. I mean, ridiculous. Everyone knows it's 4 minutes, right? Unacceptable. I think the athletes are more to blame than me, but we're gonna.
It's a new sport for everybody, so I mean, I totally understand that you're not going to know the ins and outs. I'm still learning. I've been a football fan my entire life, and I'm still learning things about football every day. So, American football. So.
Yeah. Well, I noticed you reference other sports a lot, which I find interesting. Obviously, trying to grow a sport, you're looking at what's worked and what hasn't in other sports. But I quite like it because I'm not a big sports fan at all. In fact, pre CrossFit, I didn't really follow any sport, which is why the fact that I've gone in so hard on CrossFit is ridiculous, because Augusta says the real football. The real football. You're using your hands. What are you talking about? The real football.
I get it.
I did too.
Also, hold on. Jason Grid League. Okay, Heidi. By the way, just yes, this is another Grid League one, but on Monday we've got Alison Scuds, so we're going, CrossFit again. So don't worry, it's all happening.
Fun fact: Alison Scuds played in the Grid League originally.
There we go. You see, all right. I need to make a note of that.
Yeah, she's from actually our area. She started in Miami, so I got to know her a little bit, and so yeah, she has tried Grid League.
It almost feels like everybody has. That they were listing off some names yesterday, big names, big CrossFit names. Sorry, Augustus keeps distracting me with his comments. Demo team media, yeah, okay, I like it. Very good. Anyway,
no, Cassie and I are not married. We are just co-workers, I guess.
Yeah. Well, every time we get to, this show, every time I have at least 2 guests, that is the format. And yet the question keeps coming up: Are they a couple? Are they together? And I kind of think if they were, maybe they'd be on the same screen quite often.
That's such a good point.
That's true.
Heidi doesn't care about CrossFit.
I'm 23.
24.
That was another question that she had.
Okay, let's just quickly knock off some of these questions then. And then it's your sister that is controlling the Grid account. Is that Ruby?
Yes. Yeah, we have a few people on our accounts. It could be me, it could be her, it could be Kayla. And there's others as well.
And Jake, no, me and Mavra are not a couple either. So.
Long distance.
Tell that to Seth, and then okay, all right, very good. So, Grid's gone through some big changes particularly this year. You dropped Florida as in the name, which I appreciate. I never used it anyway. I just always called it Grid, but I know other people. I know there were different divisions, there were different leagues, but now. Right, I'm just gonna face this way a little bit so the comments don't keep distracting me as much. Was that like a big step for you then to kind of, because it had been quite some years that you'd been Florida focused, we could say. So like, how long was the lead up to trying to kind of expand in the way you have and spill outside of the borders, I guess?
Yeah, so the original plan with the Florida Grid League was to create regional leagues, but multiple of them. And so, part of the issue with the original version of Grid League was the costs were not sustainable to run the league the way that it was designed. So we redesigned it in a new way. And Florida was always kind of intended to stay regional originally. Then this little thing called COVID happened. We couldn't have events where we expanded the same way that we did in Florida. But at the same time, our Florida accounts started blowing up. We started broadcasting our matches. They were getting lots of view through. And so it just kind of organically happened that players started coming from outside of Florida. More and more people were watching from outside of Florida. And so we just took the original league that was originally intended to be regional and decided, okay, this is going to be our path to expansion and national, and who knows from there.
Okay, nice. And has it, so you noticed already there was interest from outside coming in, so then you're like, all right, let's just do it. This season, have you noticed a big increase over the last seasons? And are people watching from further afield? Are people attending more that maybe haven't? I suppose that's more going to be like a Vegas thing that you would kind of see that, but yeah, I'm just curious to know how the season is going. I've asked a lot of the teams how the season is going, and they're very focused on how it's going with regards to their 2-0 for races. But I'm just curious how the season is going from your point of view, a kind of behind the scenes point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. We've actually had more viewership from outside of Florida for a couple of years now. And so from a state perspective, California is number one, Texas is number two, and then Florida. And I think that's a reflection of the concentration of CrossFit fans and participants. And that's obviously a pretty easy transition in our sport because people are already familiar with the movements in a lot of ways. And even some of our players are CrossFit Games athletes and such. So we do have a lot of like strongman, strong women, gymnastics fans that do migrate over as well. But yeah, so that trend has continued. Florida is also a high concentration of CrossFit athletes, and it's also where a lot of our players come from. So that's still a really big portion of our viewership. But internationally has grown significantly as well. There's a big following in Brazil. They're like 15% on average of our viewership on broadcasts. And then the UK, even though it's small, I think you've helped spread the good word, and we do have a good amount of viewership there as well.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping it will. I'm looking forward to the next. Check the UK stats next time. Let's see if we've done anything with all these interviews, because that would be nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Cassie, how's your Portuguese? Are you ready for the Brazilian market to explore?
Oh, definitely not. I'm still trying to perfect my Spanish grammar. So
yeah. And your name is Martinez.
Yeah, I mean, I speak Spanish, but enough to commentate an entire match, I definitely don't think so.
No.
Yeah,
but it would be fun to try.
Oh, I'll give it my best shot. Yeah. I'll just run my mouth. I'll Spanglish the heck out of it if I have to.
I mean, I noticed from the names of players that it seems like there's a lot of Spanish speakers within the grid community. Is that just because it being located in Florida initially and people kind of coming over, or is there something about grid that it just attracts these people? Because I'm noticing it particularly when I'm like booking in guests and thinking, oh, I've got to try and say this name.
Yeah, I think Jamie touched on that a little bit in her episode about how everybody is kind of in that concentrated area, at least in the Southern Conference, as we formerly knew it. So the Lions, the Palms, the Venom, and the Breakers, we're more or less kind of in that same South Florida area, and we interact a lot with each other. And this area is very much a melting pot of all different kinds of people and cultures, and it's probably the biggest population of Hispanic people in the country in South Florida. So that's just kind of as a result of grid being where it's located mostly.
Yeah, and I think like Paola, who's been on the or this podcast, and Laura, Emiliana, they became involved with the league because of that proximity, but their followings are obviously Hispanic as well, and therefore has brought a lot of attention and therefore interest in playing from additional Hispanic players. So I think that's been a natural kind of progression that way.
Yeah. Because I'm trying to think of, because I know like also like CrossFit exploded in Brazil as well. Like that was another area where, and I'm just trying to kind of mentally think, are the trends similar? Like, are we seeing the same sort of communities globally be like, oh, we quite like this, which sort of talks to more of a cultural, not, I was going to say bias, but maybe not the right word, but it's interesting because it's not CrossFit, but obviously if you like CrossFit, there's a good chance this will appeal to you as well.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's an easier transition to initially begin to watch. I'm a CrossFitter. I've been CrossFitting since 2010. A lot of the people at the league are CrossFitters. And, that's a big reason we ended up starting the league, is because we saw this as a way to express that one of the skills that people develop in CrossFit in another way. Also true in gymnastics, strongman, strongwoman, Olympic weightlifting, even powerlifting to an extent. But what really, the way that it operates and the experience of it is actually more of a team sport than it is like CrossFit. So the transition from understanding what the movements are and being somewhat like naturally attracted to watching those movements performed is a CrossFit characteristic. But the way that the strategy plays out, the way that the season is structured, the way that typical sports drama happens is a lot actually more like team sports. So it's a blend of the two, and the people that really resonate most almost immediately are like American football fans that are also CrossFitters, we're going to get those most of the time.
So sort of marrying the two things that they love. This sort of because that's, I mean, that I guess that's the thing where well, I don't follow a lot of sport anyway. My brother though was like, growing up, he followed every sport. Well, from within the UK. So, you know, football, rugby, tennis, things like that. It was sort of whatever the season was, he was all in on that. But there is something about American sports that they're different, right? Like even for us, when we see them, we can kind of pick them out and be like, yeah, because that's very, very American. And I see that in grid as well. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's just a thing. It's just something I observe. But I do get that if you are sort of, Artisan. Okay. I needed to check I could say his name because I've got to say that later. So I do think that that's interesting, and the fact that it does appeal that way. And I like because again, you know, it's so I hate always comparing it to CrossFit, but it's just
Feel free. I mean,
it's sort of the go-to thing. But it's like we have team competitions, but you know, you could be on a team this weekend at a competition, and next weekend you're on a different team and it's a different competition, and the slate's wiped clean, and maybe the person that you were going up against last week, now you're on a team together kind of thing. You know? And I mean, we're going to see that with like, you know, the teams at tier Wodapalooza SoCal, for example. And then I know like FitFest are going to have exhibition teams again, and they're going to be, you know, so that it's a team, but it's not the same as sort of, this is your team. Now you've got multiple matches over a season, and there's that sort of, you know, oh, this is the team that I'm cheering on this season, and you know, I'm going to follow their journey, and I'm going to, you know, celebrate their wins. I'm going to mourn their losses, and it's sort of you don't really get that with team competitions, because you might be like, oh, you know, even at the games, you know, athletes that are on a team that win one year at the games might be on a different team the next year, and so you're sort of like, well, was it that one athlete that I was really a fan of, or was it the team because they're from that gym, or was it like, what was it that drew me to that team? Because next year, maybe I don't care. Maybe I don't care anymore. I don't know. So anyway, yeah, interesting.
You nailed it. I mean, the way CrossFit has teams is essentially individual performances broken up amongst multiple people. And the reason I say that is exactly what you just said, Jason. There's no consistency in the brand year over year. The team, you know, fluctuates depending on who's potentially in it, which is normal, but there's not a team brand. The closest would be like Mayhem, for example. You know, they have a team that's in there, but every year, but they might not make it one year, and then you can't necessarily cheer for them. At some point, you know, that consistency doesn't exist. So one of the big advantages to team sports is you grow a connection with the team brand rather than the individual players. You grow that connection to the players as well, but that's secondary to the brand in general of the team. And that's why fandom continues to grow. I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan. I will be to the day that I die. And, you know, players within that team, I'll become fans of while they're in Eagles. But my commitment to that team brand is consistency that can grow over time, because my kids, if I ever have them, will be Eagles fans as well. You know, so that's one of the big advantages that team sports have that UFC doesn't have, that CrossFit doesn't have, even tennis, you know, doesn't have, because they don't have that consistency long term that can grow over time.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, and that's interesting because, like, so it's only been like a couple of years. So I was like, I think it's maybe 3 years. Now, this is maybe my third year properly kind of, I think like 2 years ago, I was just dipping my toe in the grid waters. And then last year, it was when I was like, I am going to follow the entire season. And I watched every match, and I was like, okay, I understand what's going on. And now this year, I'm like, well, now I'm, you know, now I know what's going on with grid. So I'm following it in a different way. So it's the first year that for me, like, players changing teams is really noticeable.
Right.
And the problem is, and this is making it harder, getting all the different athletes to come on the show from the different teams, because you're right, like, which team now am I supposed to be cheering for? Because I like a lot of the athletes and they're not all on the same team, and that makes it hard. And I don't have the luxury of being like, well, I grew up in this area, or, you know, I'm from that, or my football team is this one, or my basketball team is from. It's like, throw a dart, pick a team. That's so.
It makes it really interesting, especially because it is a team sport, and watching the way that people interact with each other in a different way than they might watch CrossFit. Because in CrossFit, the most teamwork that you'll have is kind of like doing something synchronized. More or less, everybody kind of goes into it knowing exactly what they have to do. But on the grid, there's a lot of things that need to be done on the fly. And that's kind of where you kind of identify with a certain player or a certain team. Someone might take the lead more, and you kind of identify like, oh, like this person just picked up this person's slack. They're communicating very well. So in that sense as well, it's just a really different sport to watch because of how mental it is and how much of a unit you have to be. So I don't know about you guys, but when I was growing up, I watched sports movies, and I would only ever cry during sports movies. So my favorite movie growing up was Rudy, which is a football movie about this guy that's really short, and his team like fought for him to be on the Notre Dame football team. And he ended up catching the winning touchdown. So that was like a big story for me, like not only as a short person, but as a sports fan. Like that camaraderie and that teamwork just really makes you identify with a team so much more, and makes you want to watch and learn more about them.
And I like that Jake has jumped in with a Flying V Mighty Ducks reference. So yeah, we had sports movies. No, that is interesting. And while you're saying all of that, I'm also thinking, and she's got to like, I mean, part of your job is trying to kind of convey some of that drama, and so, because it's moving fast, right? But it's your job there when you're calling the match, the race. You're kind of trying to give people those little indications as to maybe, someone's picked up, they've dropped a rep early, so's got to go and cover for them, or this has happened, or oh no, that's a really costly, like, they didn't make the tag. Not making the that's the thing that just that's the other thing. This sport will frustrate you when people make mistakes.
Like, how can you do that? He was right there.
You didn't make the tag. Oh, you've got to go all the way back. No, this is it. It's game over. Game over for them now.
It's really high adrenaline, man. Like me watching it, like I've even like yelled a few times during the live streams, like, oh no, he missed it. Like just like out of like pure shock. Like I truly can't believe the things that happen sometimes. And it's truly like exciting. And that's what makes me keep wanting to come back. And I would be watching it even if I weren't, working for the league. 100%.
So I'm curious how you started working for the league. Well, I'm also curious how you first got into it anyway, and then I also think maybe I know the answer, but I'm curious to know how you first got involved, and then how you ended up, doing what you're doing now.
So I was dating Paul. Well, we were friends, and he was kind of like, oh, I work equipment crew for the Florida Grid League. And I had no idea what that was. I'd never seen CrossFit. CrossFit, like I didn't even have a definition for CrossFit in my brain. That's how like so far out of the loop I was. So he's like, oh, like they're looking for people to help run equipment. So I go with him to help, like stack the plates and put them on the grid. And like in between that, I'm watching it and I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, I can't believe it. And this is me 4 years ago, that the most I'd ever done at the gym was like hit a quarter depth squat, and thinking that I was like working out really hard. So I just kept on coming back. I fell in love with the sport. It's what made me want to get into Olympic weightlifting in the first place. The next season when I came back, I was actually a referee. And I was counting referee, and I was the one that was yelling at them, and they were like, man, like you're really good at yelling. Like I could really hear you like over everybody screaming. And I was like, that's awesome. Like that's all I wanted to hear. So then after that summer, I had reached out to Mather and I told him I'm studying sports journalism at Florida International University, and I'd love the opportunity to come and be a part of whatever you're doing for the media. So he instantly agreed to it. Thank you, Mather, for giving me the opportunity. And I was doing sideline interviews, and whenever Alan or Joe, who are my co-hosts whenever we're on the live streams, couldn't make it, I would kind of fill in for their spot. So yeah, that's my story.
So you kept being like, Joe, you don't need to be there today. Just take it easy. Have a rest day.
I'm all sick, dude.
Yeah. How's the voice treating you? Not so great. I'll fill in. Interesting. Now the chat, Cassie, have gone mad about. Wait, hold on. What's going on with Paul? Like, so you're together? You were friends?
Yes. So now we're together. We've been together ever since. We were just kind of friends at that point, and then we started dating, like kind of like halfway through that season, and now we've been seeing each other ever since.
Yeah. Okay. So chat can relax. If Heidi already left, I'm sorry, because that's the kind of thing she wants to stick around for. So
crossfit. I definitely fell in love with Paul too.
Yeah, it's so interesting. When Cassie first came on the team, I was like a little bit like scared of her because she was out of her comfort zone, and you could really tell. And not scared of her, but I felt like I was scared to like ask her to do things because she just seemed so kind of like tense. And I'm describing when you were the equipment crew. But it went great. She kept coming back. She became a ref because we needed her to, and she stepped up and she excelled at that. She learned the sport, became really good. And then we started talking about the potential of like, all right, where do you want to be? Because it was clear at that point, extremely talented person and just leans into whatever she's, focused on doing and does it well, which is extremely rare to find. And so we were super excited about, honestly, just working with her in any capacity. And then when she said she wanted to be in media, we're like, great. So let's see how that goes. And so she started like kind of slow and is literally, one of the biggest bright points to our broadcast is we get great feedback all the time about how she presents the sport, how she explains it, and the energy that she brings to it. So I think it's an awesome story that like the community, the way that Grid League has literally brought in people like Cassie and allowed them to shine in capacities they wouldn't necessarily have otherwise, including players, team owners, myself. And is really the driver behind making it happen overall.
Were you expecting a performance review today, Cassie, when you agreed to come on the show?
I wasn't, but I just keep on getting the best compliments today.
Yeah.
I'm just taking it all in.
You're like, I know which parts I'll clip for reals. Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you do a great job. Because I think when I first started watching you were mostly doing like the interviews with the players, which is tough because, I mean, it's tough again. Here we go, CrossFit comparisons. It's tough with the ones in CrossFit, but like, they're maybe 4 heats. Maybe they're interviewing after every heat. Probably not. So maybe it's the final heat. They'll interview the winner, and then that person's now got a couple of hours break before they need to do anything again. Whereas you've got race after race after race. So and it's 2 teams, right? So you're going to be one of the other teams that you're talking to kind of each time. So you've got to, you kind of, you don't have that 20 minutes to sit back and let them do the next heat. Think about maybe one question you're going to ask them at the end. It's sort of, okay. And you've got to pay attention to what's happened because, as you said, so much can go on. So that's weird. So I think you were mostly doing that when I first started watching, and then I saw, you kind of transition over to being a bit more on the desk and calling the, and I think the last match, there was somebody new. At least I think it was new that you were working with
Byram.
Byram, yeah, and in that scenario, you were like the senior expert kind of on the thing, having to be a little bit more breaking stuff down, what's happening, what we're seeing, and so that was really nice to see kind of this jump to you having to also kind of help him. So he was great in what he was doing, but obviously, he knew what he was talking about with what was happening and with particularly, some of the movements, but just the kind of the flow of the races, that was very much sort of in your hands. So, well done.
Thank you. I definitely wasn't expecting to do anything like that this season, but I was grateful for the opportunity, and it was a lot of fun to be able to just like put myself out there and see what I can do and kind of dictate the flow of the live stream. So it was really cool, the things that you can like learn from just kind of taking over. I was kind of seeing things from Joe's perspective because Joe is usually the one that takes the lead in that situation. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Did you then text Joe after and be like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for all the stress I've put on you over the last couple of years. Yeah, I realize now how hard you've been working.
Like, Joe, you're so good at this. I can't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, I told Joe that he just needs to, I think he's got to wear a tuxedo in Vegas. Otherwise, he's got no chance if with the outfit you pulled off last time.
I was excited to dress up because Byram, it was actually his idea to dress up for the live stream. And I kind of always try to match the vibe of whoever I'm next to. So when he said he was wearing a suit, I was like, I have the perfect outfit. I was ready. I was waiting with that Barbie outfit in the closet, waiting to pull it out.
There we go. Yeah, nice. Chat's been going off again. I like that Arthur's been answering a lot of the questions, which is very convenient. You have to address that. Cross fat. Oh, unbelievable. His mother dating athlete. How does he balance that? I don't know.
Yeah, so this is something that is a great question. And I think we're going to do an episode on it with one of the people in the league that started a podcast. But yeah, Briley is a team owner, and I've known her since before the league. And there's obviously been a lot of evolution with the relationship with that, with all the team owners. And it's definitely challenging. But ultimately, it's the right thing for the sport and everybody involved to have the situation the way that it is. So, if you have specific questions, I can answer them. But I think, we're planning to do kind of a more in-depth one with her involved, just so people kind of understand how it all works and, how people ask questions and think about it.
Yeah. Okay. Who started a podcast?
His name is Matt. He actually he does the finish line recording at our matches to make sure that, like, when we have a close finish, that we have a side view to look at it, because a lot of times the races are so close that you can't tell who won. And so he's got like a really good personality on camera and knows a lot of the athletes and players and team owners really well. So he just recently started. It's called Tales from the Finish Line. Okay.
All right. Well, we will have to go and check that out. Don't Augustus is trying to defend me here. He's sort of like, oh, you won't discuss it on Jason. I rebounded just for this. That's fine. Hey.
I mean, ask any questions you want. Like I said, it's it'll be the focus of that, but I'm here for anything.
Yeah, well, that's fine. That's and Riley's been on the podcast before as well. Back before it was live, back when it was safe, when I would record like 4 episodes in a week and then just drip them out over a month, and I had a lot of free time. But we wouldn't get these wonderful questions when we were doing it that way. So these are the differences. Okay, so we've worked out how you got involved. That was interesting. I was curious about that, Cassie. These comments drive me mad now.
Wait, I want Mather to answer that one about the dreads.
Yeah, so my mentality since I've been a little kid is always kind of against the grain, and this is one of the reasons that I'm drawn to grid. It's because putting men and women together on the same team is against the grain, and it creates a lot of scenarios that the world hasn't really seen before, and ultimately is one of the reasons we have a lot of haters and whatnot, but that's okay. And dreads kind of falls into that. Like, my hair actually naturally does it. If I wear a hat for a while in Philadelphia, it almost starts to naturally dread. So one time I just decided to lean into it, put it together, and here we are.
How long ago was that?
That was over 20 years ago. I've had them for a long time.
Wow. Okay.
Were you a defiant child?
I wouldn't say defiant, but I always just kind of like.
Would your parents say defiant?
It would maybe to an extent, but like it was more like I always was kind of like had my own style, like did my own thing. I didn't really try to fit in with other groups necessarily, and I think that mentality is transferred over into this.
So longer than Cassie's been alive.
Close.
Yeah. Okay. That fascinating. So one of the things you've been doing recently that I quite enjoyed is you've kind of, I think even when Eric was on, he was talking about the fact that, man, you guys get a lot of hate in the comments. There's a lot of people that love to, but I mean, that is to be expected. It happens exactly the same in CrossFit, right? I mean, I still just wish butterfly pull-ups weren't a thing, just for the amount of comments that we get about them. And like I had a couple of the teen athletes now, well, this weekend competing. And I was asking them like, oh, you're traveling from the UK to America to compete at the CrossFit game. Like, what do your fellow classmates think about this? And like, do they even know anything about CrossFit, know what you're doing? And it's like across the board, 3 different people, 3 different schools. The thing that everybody knew was you do those weird pull-ups. Like that was it. That's their knowledge of CrossFit. So, so it's no surprise that then Grid will get a lot of these kind of comments, because even more than CrossFit, you're trying to do things fast. Like that's the sport, right? Here's a movement. How fast can you do it? It's a race. You still got judges, you're still getting no reps, you've still got movement standards that have to be met, which are interesting because they're similar but different to CrossFit as well. Some of the standards. So I didn't know the one about the pistol thrusters.
Pistol thruster.
That it was about the hand position. That was interesting. That's so I'm learning stuff. But your responses are quite interesting to like you've got clearly an analytical mind, and you kind of break down their comments, and just I find it quite enjoyable. But what's sort of what are the most common things you're hearing, like the common complaints, and sort of what's your I see your blanket answer to the majority of them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually love the haters. I've gone through a whole range of emotions over the years with haters. When you really care about something and believe in it and are passionate about something, it obviously initially is, it's painful to get haters, but that was years ago that I felt like that. Now I see it as an opportunity for people to either dig further into the sport or explain the opposition, So, and it also feeds the algorithm. Like, honestly, if our movements weren't controversial, we wouldn't have near the following that we do. But here's how I like to think about it. Everybody sees these movements through their own lens. And for people outside of the CrossFit, they're looking at what CrossFit does as something that they don't do. And there's reasons they don't do it. And therefore, it's wrong. And that's why you have the comments, and people want to always position themselves as experts in whatever they're doing, right? So Grid League turns it up a notch. And the thing about Grid League and CrossFit is that a lot of the movements that are used are common in developing fitness. So when people work out, we use a lot of these movements in both. That's actually a completely different application than the way we're actually using the movement. So when you look at it through the lens of, is this person trying to develop fitness? It makes zero sense at all. So of course that almost makes sense as to why people would have a hater perspective, because like our movements don't make sense to develop fitness. That's not what they're designed for. That's not what it is. And so when CrossFitters look at Grid League, they look at it through the lens of CrossFit. What have I been teaching about CrossFit all my life? What have I been battling about CrossFit? It's butterfly pull-ups. It's dangerous. Well, Grid League looks even more dangerous. So therefore, it must be a problem. And so, I definitely understand why it exists. And one of the biggest comparisons that I really love about this is I had the lucky opportunity to talk to the UFC PR director for like 12 years. And she said in the early years of UFC, they got massive amounts of hate. So the boxing community hated them because they broke down all of the reasons that boxing was a gentleman's sport, and it was bloodier, it was more savage, blah blah blah. The politicians were rallying against it, calling it human cockfighting and this and that. You had actual organizations like against UFC in general because it's violent, so they had haters on a whole nother level, and the same reason they had those haters is the same reason they're a major sport today, because it grabs your attention and it creates that tension and excitement and power. So I think a lot of the things are parallels in our regard, because what the movements are designed to do are exhibit athleticism in a way that it grabs attention. Clearly it does that because we have a lot of clips that go viral. And the controversy around that is a big reason they go viral, because people comment on it, they share on it, they hate on it. But you also have a big percentage of people who are like, wow, that is crazy. I can't believe that somebody can actually do that, which those people are now the potential to come be a fan. So I feel like if, you've heard that statement, if you make something for everyone, you make something for no one. We want to create something that actually has some controversy around it so that it creates that conversation, it creates that virality that will bring the people in that understand what we're trying to do with it, what it actually demonstrates. Because if anybody's ever sat on the top of a ring and said, now I'm going to do a backward roll to support, they know that's incredibly difficult. Nobody's ever going to try that unless you're an elite athlete, But somebody on the internet can see that and say, oh, that's dangerous for kids to try. No kid's going to try it. It's like saying a skateboarder that jumps down a set of stairs is doing something dangerous that kids can try. Yes, very obvious. You know what I mean? So, I get excited and passionate about talking about this stuff because it's an important component of our sport. And yeah, so that's kind of like my blanket answer.
Yeah, I think as well, it's interesting you're saying about like looking through the lens that you've got, and it's true, right? Because the difference again with grid is having the specialists. Mm-hmm. So it's like if you were just putting, lots of pull-ups, like lots of butterfly pull-ups, it's like, well, you're, like generally, let's say the fittest people in your average box, they would be able to do that. They'd be able to smash through that as well. And that doesn't, why then do we need specialists if you're just doing what your kind of average, decent level CrossFit, practitioner can do? It doesn't require a specialist for, the med ball for the ring muscle ups, doing the rolls, the reverse, all of, the uprises, all of that. Now we're putting it to a level that is beyond what the majority of people, even high level, athletes that are doing CrossFit can do. And therefore we need specialists to come in. Similar, I guess, with the strength thing to a degree, although, there's some pretty strong people within CrossFit, but it's that balance, isn't it? So someone who's very good at gymnastics and has grown up all their life doing gymnastics will look at it and be like, oh, maybe it's interesting, maybe it's challenging, but they're not looking at it as maybe it's the most insane, crazy thing they've ever seen. And how could the human body do that? Because they know how they can do that. Mm-hmm. But those of us that are, using a barbell are looking at it and going, well, that's, how on earth are they doing that? That's not safe. That's dangerous. That's crazy. And I guess it's vice versa for, well, we've spoken to the gymnasts. They all want to do the ladder, and that's their goal. They're trying to work to get stronger on the barbell.
I think that's also one of the parts that made grit exciting to me, is because I didn't come of a background of any of that. I didn't know too much about CrossFit. I did cheerleading briefly in my youth. So going into grit and not knowing anything, looking at comments like, oh, this is useless. Like, what stimulus, what exercise is this? And I'm just looking at it. I'm like, the stimulus is like, my heart is going like this. Like, what the heck are they doing? Like, that's awesome, Yeah. So well, it's very different coming from different perspectives. But for me, especially not knowing, like, obviously you have to exercise to get to that point, but knowing like, wow, that just looks crazy.
Well, Mava, you used a great example the other day, because you were talking about pole vault, and like if you'd never heard of that, if that wasn't a thing and someone just decided to go and do that, you would look at that like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? You're jumping over a stick. Okay, with another stick. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like anything novel, anything different, anything that people have never seen before is going to get resistance with people that think that things should be done a certain way. And that goes for a lot of different things in our sport. Movements is one of them, but also men and women facing each other on the grid at the same time in the same race has really been never done before. Another example is sharing a barbell. Like, Men and women never share a barbell in competition, including CrossFit competitions. And there's variations on movements for, to offset the physical differences. But, that concept is so foreign to people that, it kind of like crosses some wires and like, hey, that's not right, because that's not the way I see the world. You know what I mean? So that's when they, get on their keyboard and make everybody else aware of that.
Yeah. I'm also curious from the other side. So the majority of people, obviously, within my circle that I've spoken to that have seen grid or have opinions on it are usually those coming from within the CrossFit community that have got over to grid or whatever. Although I'm looking at the comments and like Fico is saying, those that are doing gymnastics have been doing these things since they were 5 years old. And it's like, so this is what I'm kind of curious is, like, you've got some really strong people on the grid that are doing like the flip sled races and the yokes and stuff like that. Within kind of that portion of the community, how do they view things that are going on in grid? Like, not necessarily the athletes, I'm sure they love it, but do you get much kind of interactions or feedback from people that are coming maybe from a strongman background or powerlifting or something? And if so, are they sort of similar comments to those that are coming from within CrossFit, or is it very different sort of observations?
Yeah, I would say strongman, strongwoman, they generally are downgrading the level of difficulty and the extreme nature of what they do when they come into our sport. So from a risk perspective, they're in an easier sport, generally speaking, with us. It's a very different experience because they're on a team and they're shining with what they're good at as part of a team. And at least from what I've heard, there's been some, like, there's a 2-time world's strongest man, Anthony Furman, that played on the Sharks, and he loved the experience. Said it was the most fun he's ever had in sport. And he's a 2-time world's strongest man. So it's very similar with Olympic weightlifting, where people get to showcase their strengths. There's a lot of difference in how you perform the movement in Olympic weightlifting, but if they can overcome those differences, they like the team environment, they have an incredible time. Because generally Olympic weightlifting, it's all about an individual 6 lifts, high tension like you can't imagine, and no room for error. Whereas on a team, like, you can always fall back on your teammates' performance, and you're going out there for your team, not just for yourself. So it's very different experiences. It resonates with some, it doesn't with others. But in general, strongmen, the strength side of things, there's nothing crazy that they're doing that they wouldn't do in their own sport, in ours, besides like maybe more reps, essentially.
Yeah, and having to cross the whole length of the grid, they're like, that's a lot of running. That's more running than I like to do in a strongman competition. I'm also curious if Cassie's ever, like, because I know you do the Olympic lifting, you've gone to some comps for that, you've got the singlet, so you're as professional as they come in my eyes. I'm just curious if you're ever, you're there, you're talking about grid, you're watching it a lot. Are you ever tempted to kind of dip your toe into the mix?
I make a post every year tagging all the teams saying I could clear the first bar of every ladder and to sign me, and I never get any offers. So
it's because, as I told you, everybody wants to do the ladder. What is it about the ladder? That's the thing that they're
so cool. It's just like the ultimate, like, macho experience, especially if you're a woman. Like, you never really get that chance anywhere else to just kind of like, yeah, like, look what I can do. So it's just that opportunity to kind of like hit that 4th bar, and you're just like flexing at the camera, like, oh yeah. I saw some comments about my shoulders earlier. Thank you.
Well, I think people are complaining that Jake wasn't complimenting your shoulders enough after all the nice things he said to Chelsea yesterday.
I'll take the mention.
Yeah. Jake is eager to get grid going here. Look at this.
Yeah.
The potential of strongman, powerlifting, weightlifting, gymnastics over here, alone CrossFit, such a big opportunity. I'm with you. I agree.
Yeah, for whatever reason, like, we have had a good amount of people reach out from the UK about starting a UK league, and many different people have expressed interest and even started taking steps. And it's actually true in Australia, in South America, in other places in Europe, Canada, even in Asia. It's a really hard thing to do. I think a lot of people that have watched the sport any amount of time get the vision, get the way it could go. And therefore, when they see that, they're like, oh, I want to help make this happen because I can see where it can go. And then when you get into the nitty gritty of what's actually required to make it happen, it's way more difficult than a CrossFit competition. It's way more difficult than a pickup, soccer game because everybody knows how to play soccer. You're introducing a brand new sport to a group of people that may or may not have a mental resistance to the concept of the sport overall. So incredibly challenging. And we've literally found nobody that has, put time and money and effort into creating leagues in collaboration with us. There have been leagues that have started, completely separately that, as I understand, are successful and doing well. But just a little bit of a backstory on other people in the UK and otherwise that have actually attempted to start.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I've kind of been behind the scenes at quite a few competitions and events, and you see sort of just how much stress and work and effort is going into putting on a 3-day competition once a year or a 2-day competition. And then you're like, now try and kind of repeat that in a couple of locations over a period so you can have, all the different matches and have the different fixtures and make sure that the different teams are going to go against each other and manage these teams that are going to be of a certain size. So there's quite a, there's quite a lot of moving parts, I imagine, in getting it done. We have an event here, Strength in Depth Origins, that is a 12-person team event. And that's a lot of fun in the sense that, again, people get people have different strengths and weaknesses, and the way the events are set up, kind of, there can be that degree of strategy and being like, because it has to be a mix of men and women, and it has to also include 2 masters athletes. So there are like requirements, and they all have to come from the same affiliate. So that's the other kind of, so that's where the whole Strength in Depth came from. It wasn't that you had an affiliate with 2 games athletes and that meant you were the best. It was sort of, well, across, a number of athletes at your affiliate, how good are you? And so that has always been for me kind of like sort of one of the closest examples we get, but it's a 2-day event that happens once a year. Kind of, it's not the same thing, but it's nice just to see. Sid was 2 CrossFit for Jake, apparently. Tribal was awesome, but Grid is there on its own. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and back in the day, CrossFit, the games used to have the Invitational. I don't know if anybody on this is familiar with it, but that was always my favorite CrossFit event personally. And I still watch the games today and whatnot, but and I think what Wadapalooza is doing is quite interesting. And I think, they've created a concept that has resonated with a lot of people, and who they have involved has helped generate that interest and whatnot. So I'll be watching for sure.
So that Jake Chapman, he went to Berlin to watch it in 2013. So you see, we've got some OGs in the chat as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. Very cool.
I mean, that the Invitational is like one of the carrots that they tease now and again of like, oh, maybe we'll bring it back, and it's just never come back. It's and at this point, I don't think we'll ever see it back, at least not from CrossFit. So
right, unlikely. But it seems like Wadapalooza, if this goes well, could potentially take that baton and run with it. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard, but building a brand new team sport is really, really difficult. I will just say that.
Oh, wow. This is someone on the inside who's asking an interesting question. Can you talk about how the schedule was defined this year, since we don't have conferences anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. So one background thing, my sister and I, who's my business partner, we are, I take the marketing and competition side of things. She takes the operations and event and staff, and then Lindsay does a lot of the event operations now. Brandon's doing a lot of the competition. But we as a group meet with all the team owners to make these types of decisions. Oftentimes we at the staff level will come up with an idea and pitch it to the team owners or we'll develop them on the calls with the team owners together. But these types of decisions are always made with all the team owners involved. And if there's any kind of split, there's a vote. So ultimately, team owners make the decisions that drive this kind of thing. Now, I was in favor of removing the conferences this year, and the main reason being that we wanted to try and position the matchups in a way that would most likely yield exciting matches. So pairing the ability of the teams to kind of match one another as much as possible so that we lead to more exciting outcomes. And so the way we would do that is and because all of our events this year have all 8 teams, which is actually also a rarity. So we're always really focused as a league on creating the best matches that we can so that people get a good experience, even if it's their first time watching. Now, it hasn't exactly played out that way that we have intended. And it's not like the conferences being removed are a permanent thing. It was one of those things where we're early enough in the sports life cycle that removing the conferences wouldn't have a major impact. But if we can have a lever we can pull to create more exciting matches, which is one of the biggest ones that exists as far as how far the live stream goes and things like that, then we would take that opportunity as a young sport trying to, do everything we can to enhance the viewer experience of the sport. So I actually believe the conferences will come back and maybe even as early as next year. But that'll be a collective decision made by all the team owners. And it was not made lightly. But who comes in and where we have the events is ultimately going to help decide that.
You're happy about it? So from what I'm understanding is if you're not happy about this decision, you should speak to your team owner because probably it's their fault. So that's which is, I'm guessing Bridie, right? He's on the Palms. Yeah. So there we go.
That's right.
There we go.
I love that there's no conferences this season. I've always found that kind of a barrier watching American football. You really want the 2 best teams to kind of go to the Super Bowl. And I think that's going to make it a very exciting season at the end of this going into playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's a very foreign concept to me, like the conferences, because I'm used to divisions, but that is very much performance based, right? So you're going to have like the top division because they are the best teams. So them going against each other is giving you, your desired outcome of having the best teams go against each other. And then lower divisions, there's kind of that goal of, well, if we can win our division, we can be promoted to the next level. And usually that, brings with it more money, more sponsorship and so on and so forth. So that all makes sense to me because I'm like, yeah, you're not very good. You keep losing matches, you get relegated. You're very good. You keep winning, you go up. Brilliant. And then, you start looking over to American sports and you're like, okay, hold on. Why do I never see these 2 teams play each other? I like these 2 teams. And it's like, oh no, they're in different conferences. Why? And it's geographic and it's things like that. So I quite like that. Yeah, I guess it's Matt Fraser did do grid, didn't he?
He's gonna love that.
He did. Yep. Yeah. And I mean, so Matt Fraser is a great example because I've seen him talk about it on podcasts. And usually when people have some sort of thought about Grid League, it has something to do with other than the sport itself. So the experience of playing the sport isn't the issue. It's, something like in his case, he was owed something. As I understand it, I was not there. I was not involved, but he was owed something that the team did not deliver on. So, of course, that's going to create a bad, overall experience for him. But from what I understood, he really enjoyed being on the grid. And we've heard that from time and time again from games level athletes that have played the sport. Now, an experience of a player in a league is very different from team to team. It depends on how the team is run. It depends on who's on the team. It depends on the leadership style. It depends on the practice schedule, how they communicate. And so that's like one of the barriers that you have to overcome in creating this, because you can have some really influential people be on the wrong team for their situation. It might not even be a bad team. It could just be a clash in personalities. And now all of a sudden there's a shadow over the sport itself, so it's an interesting challenge that you wouldn't necessarily think about related to team sports.
Yeah. And also, I mean, they're big teams, which means there's a lot of people, a lot of personalities, a lot of possibilities for conflict. And then, I always love, we get all these names coming out. So Camilla's been added since the last time. I think we mentioned Noah and Chandler yesterday. And Matt, Annie was mentioned. Camille, she wasn't mentioned. So we're just adding to the list. So.
I don't know that Camille played. I'm not sure.
Oh, Arthur,
Wes
you need to go and do your fact check.
Yes, I actually know Wes from that, and I tried to draft him. And awesome dude, love that dude. So when I first met Wes, he had the ugliest Olympic weightlifting form you've ever seen. Like, he literally would muscle everything, and I think he'd be the first to tell you that. But this was like 10 years ago. Now an Olympian, amazing. And he's an awesome guy.
Catherine Tola. Well, I mean, the list is it's going on and on.
Yep, I'm gonna try to draft Augustus for sure.
Yeah, he was asking earlier because he got his what was it, like a 405? Was it? I think it was like 1 front squat and 3 back squats or something like that. You have to write the comment because I've lost it, Augustus. But he was asking if there's any place for him on the grid.
There's a place for you in mirror, Augustus, in the back squat mirror.
Yeah, he can just be the one carrying the bar down.
Yeah,
and the rest of the team can rest. That'll be nice.
Yeah, Jake, that was Sam Dancer. He played. I've talked to Sam Dancer, and he said he had a great experience.
405, 1 front squat, 3 back squats. There we go. Okay. Yeah. But he can't clean as much as Roderick. We know that. So.
Yeah, Roderick is a beast. He's a beast.
Top games athletes in grid for all teams. Yeah. Danny Nichols. Okay. Wow. It's a real. That was it. It's a real who's who of like recognizable names. And I would be really curious again to know from like the other side, from the strength specialists or the bodyweight specialists, if they talk the same way, like, do you know so and so is doing this grid thing? Oh wow, he's like, he's well known in the circuit for this, or they're well known for that. So it's quite.
Yeah, I mean, in strongman, we definitely got that association, because like Julie Rader, she's played grid for I think 3 years, and she's done really well in strongman. I think she's won like significant competitions. And so there has been a lot of transfer over there, even in gymnastics as well, which I'm a lot less connected in. But Chelsea, who you had on before, she's been a big performer in gymnastics. And Jen Jones, who was a games athlete, big performer in gymnastics, loved grid league. So a lot of people in gymnastics are exposed. And interestingly enough, people in gymnastics and strongman and strong women tend to have a lot of less resistance to the idea of playing grid than, percentage wise than CrossFitters. Like it's like 50-50. You're open to the idea or you're not, if you're a CrossFitter. And I think for whatever reason, I think it's mainly because the whole safety issue. Like you said before, if a gymnast comes into grid league, they're downgrading what they have to do in gymnastics, and they're doing it probably a lot less risky. I've heard some horror stories about injuries in gymnastics and why they got them. Same with strongman, strong women. It's just when you're a CrossFitter who is more used to going like 80% for 20 minutes as like, the mid-range stimulus of a workout, you're going ham for 15 seconds. It feels foreign. And then you add the difficulty, then it, really feels foreign.
Yeah. So I think I was just thinking I'm going to be at Rogue in November. I'll be keeping an eye on the strong men, strong women, to see who sticks around and like watches the CrossFit stuff, and then I'll sort of sidle up to them and be like, well, have you heard of a grid? Because maybe there'd be a place for you on a grid team. They do this kind of stuff, but they need some strong people as well. So maybe it'd be good for you. That is interesting though. I think as well with with CrossFit, it's funny because some people as well, it's almost like anything you do using CrossFit that's not CrossFit, it's like a betrayal for them.
Exactly.
And I was speaking to someone that's doing like the fitness racing thing. They're involved with the British fitness racing, and you know, they're working together with the IF3 in in the States, which is the idea of like, you know, CrossFit's a brand. It can't be recognized as a, you know, I don't know, globally it's probably going to be different in different countries, but for example, in the UK, you wouldn't be able to have CrossFit as a physical education like course in schools the same way you could tennis, rugby, you know, swimming, anything like that. Like, yes, some schools are now allowing coaches to come in and maybe like run a class, but it's not, it's viewed in a different way. And it also means you can't get funding and you can't get support from the government and all of these kind of things just because it's not a sport, and because it's a brand, it will never get that. So, you know, they're trying to create these other avenues where they're like, we can use the skills you've developed in CrossFit and you can apply it in a sport and get all these other benefits. And they've had people kind of come after them as sort of, you know, you're stealing from CrossFit. You're like stealing the methodology and you're doing, and I wonder with grid as well, if there's a similar thing where there's just some people that are going to be so, you know, married to, you know, the idea of like, if it's not CrossFit on the box, it's not CrossFit in the box. And so you're doing movements that are CrossFit movements, but you're profiting from them and it's not for CrossFit. And so there's almost like this stigma of, oh, I couldn't possibly be involved in it because somehow I'm betraying.
You're cheating on CrossFit.
Yeah, I'm cheating on CrossFit. But I mean, Jake's just said it here, learn new sports. I mean, it's also, I was speaking to someone the other day and we were talking about events that are, you know, because of what's happened with the swimming and the, you know, the restrictions CrossFit are putting on licensed events are deciding to drop the license. And it's like, you know, obviously it makes, you know, tantalizing headlines. This event has dropped their license. Shock. It's like, yeah, but licensed events didn't exist for ages. Like, they were just, you know, Wadapalooza existed before licensed events existed. Dubai, you know, all of these ones. It wasn't until sanctionals came and went, and then we started getting licensed events. But we sort of, so actually them dropping the license in the majority of cases, just going back to what they were before. It's not a big thing. Most of them have a, you know, a big enough name that it's fine. And so you're not going to say, well, that's, you know, you can't possibly go to that event because they're not a licensed event. You couldn't dare do a thruster without it being a licensed CrossFit thruster. It's like, yeah. Anyway, I mean,
yeah, and it's also human nature, because like when CrossFit first came out, Olympic weightlifters hated it because they felt like it was butchering Olympic weightlifting. And the main reason is because it's a different application of the movement that Olympic weightlifting was known for. And so, of course, it feels foreign to them. Of course, they're going to resist it. It feels like a betrayal of what they spent a lot of time teaching and demonstrating. And it's the same kind of thing. Like what you learn in CrossFit and what you develop in CrossFit, you know, CrossFit borrowed movements from all these different sports. It's no different, you know, and there's other forms of sport that are borrowing movements that CrossFit developed. And that's great, in my opinion. And CrossFit borrowed from Olympic lifting, and it borrowed from gymnastics. And the more reasons you can get people out performing these movements, I think the better. But also, I've had conversations with CrossFit Ace Cube, obviously before all the latest games, and they were very supportive. They saw that opportunity, because I think I heard you say it on one of these last ones, where when people want to play Grid League and they don't have a lot of experience in the gym and they don't know any of the movements, we send them to a CrossFit gym. Like, we believe in the methodology. I still CrossFit. A lot of people do in the league. I think it makes the world a better place because it makes people stronger, fitter, better versions of themselves, and brings a lot of awareness to how to live a better life. And that's separate from the brand itself. I'll always be grateful and respectful to the brand of CrossFit because it brought me into it, and I was a Kool-Aid chugger initially. And so like I do have a resonance with the brand, so I understand that defensive nature of it. But I don't think it really serves people, because I think a lot of people that are defensive now would really actually benefit and appreciate and love what Grid League is, and it would support their business as well and what their objectives are within their business of operating a successful gym.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, 100%. I think the more, there will be people that are like, I've seen CrossFit competitions. That's just not for me. Like, it doesn't scratch. I used to play team sports. I used to play this. I used to play that. And, I've gone to a couple of events. It's okay, but it doesn't. And maybe that's the person that grid is like ideal for them. So that person who wants to do grid, great, go train CrossFit. That'll help you. And then somebody else, wants to go and do, Whatapaluza or whatever. Great, go train at a CrossFit box. That will, and someone else who wants to try and compete at the, IF free at the Olympics in 2036 or whenever it is. Guess what? Go to a CrossFit affiliate, train like it all feeds to CrossFit, which is great. And actually, the more avenues you have, the more you're pushing people to that. Because I think, especially now, no one is going into a CrossFit box because they want to go to the games. Like it's so unrealistic. And like back in the day, maybe regionals was your goal, then a semi-final, whatever. Now I think if you're either already in and you've got that chance, or you're starting as a teen or whatever. But grid, other things, I do think they can feed in, which is nice. I saw a few questions that I have to address. And also, hi Sarah. I always forget to say hello, but welcome. 95% of people in CrossFit gyms know about the games. I think that's too high a percentage.
I agree.
I think that's way too high a percentage. Don't. Okay, that's better. Thank you, August. I was going, doesn't sound right to me. Okay. See how important that don't was? Because even in the comments, they're going, no, what are you talking about? Because I found that after this year's games, when obviously social media was blowing up with how CrossFit is dead because of what happened. And then on Monday, I went to my local affiliate and had to tell people what happened because nobody knew, because they don't know about CrossFit beyond the four walls of the gym. That is CrossFit for them.
Right.
Anyway, Cassie, I think I'm going to guess it was Jake. Jake was asking your shoulder routine. I don't know if you want to
share. Watching grid and crying that I can't do those things in the gym. So just doing a million snatches. Like, I want to be as good as them. That's what I do.
Yeah. It's just the Olympic lifting. Is that all you're doing these days? That's all I see you doing on.
Yeah, that's all I do. I actually tried to train CrossFit when I first found out about grid. I was trying to tell that story to your last point. I was trying to train CrossFit and I absolutely hated it. But I was like, I just want to do the barbell stuff. And Paul's like, that's Olympic weightlifting. I was like, I want to do that. And I also had no idea about the games watching grid. I believe the games were maybe 2 months away at that point, and I was looking forward to watching the games. And then I did watch the games, and I was like, oh, like this is CrossFit. Like that's where they're different. Like I could train CrossFit for grid, but these are two totally different worlds. Like they're so different.
I mean, I love that journey, because I think we always look at it as like, oh, people knew CrossFit and then they see grid. People know CrossFit and then they see grid, and they're like, oh, grid's trying to copy CrossFit. Oh, you're stealing CrossFit's move. And the fact that you could get into grid first and then be like, oh, these CrossFit guys are kind of trying to do the same thing over here, I think is
like, hey, Mather, they're copying you over there. No, but it was really cool to see the difference, especially knowing with kind of fresh eyes that these people were mostly training CrossFit to go into that journey of grid. So it was like, oh, so you did this to get to that. Like, so this is like this, but like really, really fast. And also men and women on the same team at the same time, really, really fast. My heart's going like this. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
CrossFit probably looks slow. Yeah. You're like, oh, it's like a grid, but slowed down. I did have another thought about that. Something you'd said, and then I looked at CrossFit's comment and I lost it. So, oh, it was way back when you were saying about the purpose of the sport, and you were like, what was the purpose? And you're like, oh, the purpose is, my heart beating fast as I watch it. But I mean, what's the purpose of any sport? Like, that's the other crazy thing, is like, you can't look at, I mean, but it happens within CrossFit anyway, doesn't it? Because people look at the games and they're like, well, what is that? What kind of training is that? And you're like, well, that's not training. That's competing. And then even more so for grid, because grid isn't even claiming to be a training methodology. It is a sport, and that's it, right? As opposed to CrossFit, where you kind of got that blurred line where you're like, okay, the games is that's different. That's not what you find in your affiliate. That's CrossFit, the methodology. That's CrossFit, the sport. They're the same, but they're different. Whereas grid, you can only say, "Oh, you're doing." Well, no, of course we don't train like that. You know, we train like that. We practice like that, but we train, you know, by doing the boring stuff that makes us good at doing the crazy quick stuff later on, sort of thing. So.
Yeah, 100%. Exactly. And that's where one of the challenges CrossFit has always had is the games is not what's in a box and vice versa. And so when the games is doing something that doesn't look good from a training perspective, haters actually have an argument because that's what quote unquote CrossFit is. We're not training. We're not trying to say training. Now, again, I understand, like you see a squat, you think, oh, they must be training because they're squatting. That's the way the world has been for a long time. So I'm not like dismissing that perspective. I'm just saying I get why it is. But yes, we're not trying to develop fitness. We don't care about fitness whatsoever. People have to have a level of fitness to play grid league, just like they have to have a level of fitness to play football or play soccer. And you know, it's different types of fitness for different roles. And I don't mind when people say we are a fitness-based sport because I understand the association. But in reality, there are some, you know, traditionally, at least in CrossFit terms, unfit people that play grid league because they either can't do a pull-up or they can't overhead squat their body weight or whatever it is. You know, so there's not a strict like requirement one way or another. You know, it's not about fitness. It's about playing the game. Just like playing the game of football is the requirement around having a base level of fitness to do so.
Yeah. And I, again, like it makes sense as a sport that you can do that. And when you look at kind of what the games is, this test of fitness, and you've got to kind of tick all the boxes. So you need to have that well-rounded capacity. It makes sense.
Right. Yep.
But that also, you know, eliminates a lot of people from being able to do that, which is the point. Right. But if I'm somebody who's like, oh, you know, I'd really like to go to these competitions, I mean, but I have these limiting factors, or actually it's the thing we see happen where people complain about, you know, these athletes that come in and they do the scaled division and then they absolutely destroy it. And they're like, oh, you know, they should have done the RX. They're not scaled. And they're like, well, I lack these certain skills and abilities that they said I needed to have to do the RX division. But yes, I am incredibly fit. So when I did the scaled one, I beat everybody. That's the kind of person you can bring in on a grid team because you're like, great, we won't use you for these things.
Right.
But man, you're going to do the burpees over the box and you're going to do the pistol jumping over a stick ones that were burpees as well. They were pretty grim. I mean, there's some really horrific movements. I've got to be like, not horrific in that I say horrific, not like people watching it online going, oh, you're going to injure yourself, but like, ugh, I just
hard to do.
Yeah.
Hard to do. Yeah, the pistol thrust is actually one of my favorite movements, and it falls into that category, I think, because it just requires so much strength, so much coordination, so much balance, and it fatigues one side of the body, so it affects every other movement in a race. And so, you know, that's one of those movements that, like, your average person is going to have very limited capacity in comparison to like a barbell movement. You also can try it, so you can see how hard it is. You know, it's one of the things I like about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's funny because it's also really like I find watching CrossFit humbling in one way because I'm not the strongest guy in the gym and I'm, you know, Cassie, I'm with you on the small team. So like I get that. But usually like within the affiliate, I'm like, well, at least kind of bodyweight movements, I'm pretty good at those. So if we've got handstand push-ups, things like that, I'm like, great. That's leveling the playing field for me in a workout. Mm-hmm. And then you watch grid and you're like, I wouldn't even be a bodyweight specialist. Like even the thing I'm good at in CrossFit, I'm not good at in grid. So that's why I'm a spectator specialist. That's my role.
I like that one. I'm gonna put that on the bio of my Instagram.
Yeah. I also quite like Jake's comment here. Grid athletes are to CrossFit what Ferrari are to Toyota. So there you go. You can have that for grid as well. Jake.
Yeah, now I will say, like, from a pure skill perspective within a single movement, totally agree. From a total fitness perspective, CrossFit crushes grid league athletes. And it's just a matter of what you're trying to demonstrate overall. Now, Tia Claire Toomey could come in and be an effective grid athlete right out of the gate, no doubt. But there are, games level athletes that would come in and struggle at grid for certain reasons. So I think it's worth noting.
Yeah. But you see, even the great thing is Tia would be limited by some of the gymnastics movements. Probably, I mean, I reckon she could probably do like the muscle up with the med ball. I reckon she could do that pretty easily. I think it's some of was it like the ring to handstand? That's that would be interesting to see. That's but maybe she spends the day with Eric and then she's suddenly
that's the thing.
That's probably.
She could probably spend 2 days and figure out how to do most of the movements because she's just that level of athlete. But again, like, we don't need to talk about how rare that is.
Yeah. Jake's followed up with Ferraris aren't getting you across the country with the family in it. They look sexy and go fast. So that's right. Yeah.
I think that's a compliment.
I think it is. I mean, I would look at it as like a grid athlete is one of those ones that finishes in the top 10 in the open for like that one workout and then you maybe don't see their name again. So it's sort of like, oh, they just happen to be really good or really fast at that movement that was 25.1, they're top 10 in the world, and then 25.2 brings in a heavier barbell or an overhead squat or something that they suddenly, okay, now I'm not top 10 in the world, I'm top 10,000, and that's fine.
And I feel in a lot of ways those kinds of athletes are the ones that excel in grid, like the ones that are very specifically good at one or two things are kind of what make the roster whole for certain teams. Like whoever's really good at the pistol thrusters and the pistol jump over the stick, they would probably be signed just for that, and let the rest of the more well-equipped, fittest, for lack of a better term, athletes to do the rest of the movements too. So that's what makes grid really cool. I know you touched on this on other podcasts with other guests, but just how the specialists really shine. And that's what really makes the sport stand apart too.
Yeah, I feel bad sometimes for the utility players because you're like they're always on. Oh, they're on all the time, and then the specialist just sitting back comes out, does the thing that goes viral, and then goes back and has another rest.
You never see them again.
Yeah, but so I totally agree with you, but it's really hard to win without some really good utility players too.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you get involved with the sport, and we do have games athletes that play in the sport and are really good because they are those utility players that soak up a lot of the work that a lot of people can do because they do it efficiently, they do it well, and you can put them in for a high volume of it. So you need both, and that's what makes it a true team sport.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Jake is now trying to recruit from the GB gymnastics team, so he's setting his sights really high on putting together this team. And Sarah talked about it's a good point that the Hyrox girl that did really well in the open. Because again, sort of just fit into that skill set that made her good at Hyrox works well in the open.
Right.
Then you bring in the further challenges that you're going to get in quarterfinals and semifinals, and that's the limiting factor. And I think that's because I've looked at quite a few of the grid athletes, sort of if they've got CrossFit profiles. So obviously you can see their open scores and you can see that they've been to the games on a team or they've gone to regionals or whatever, and it's interesting to see where they sit in the open because you're like, yeah, okay, I can see you've obviously got good skills in some areas and you're probably being pulled back in others, but that is what's making you effective on the grid, as you said. So Jake, I'm not going the 10 at Rogue, just I've got a hotel, I'm fine. He's going to get Amy Kringle on a team as well. Yeah, that would get eyes on grid. That's like getting Alex Smith for the Venoms. That's a good get as well.
Definitely helped Jake with his new UK grid league for sure.
Yeah. Jake, see, Vindicate. We're stealing American viewers now. That's what's happening with this new UK grid league. It's yeah. I mean, could you imagine? And then then you don't need the conferences. You have the UK Grid League, you have the United Grid League, and then we'll meet somewhere in Africa for a
World
finals next. Yeah, exactly. World Cup.
Yeah, okay, I would love that. I think there's the real potential for that, honestly.
Yeah, I would love. I mean, I think it would be. It would be hard. I would love to see maybe like an exhibition type thing, or even you've played quite a few times like I want to say trailer. It's not really a trailer, but like the kind of grid match you did in a box. I think it was Briley and Eric were the team captains, and they sort of put together these little mini teams and ran kind of I think something like that, kind of almost portable version that could be displayed around a little bit. I'd love to see that maybe happening in other locations. I think that would be quite cool, but I get that.
Yeah. So again, just to touch on that real quickly, because we have had a ton of these, what we call in-grid or in-house grid matches, where essentially exactly what you're saying, all skill levels, teams come into gyms, and on a Saturday, instead of a partner workout, they do a grid match. But we also do this thing called Grid 6, which is a little bit more organized, small teams, 6 players, 3 men, 3 women. And there's different divisions. So it's actually structured like a CrossFit competition as far as competitors go, but it's grid league. So there's 2 teams going at once. They go head to head. We just spread the races out over the full day rather than, like really compact like a normal grid race. So it's kind of a blend between a CrossFit competition and a grid league match, essentially.
See, so maybe Jake, look at these options to begin with. I think this is what you want to be. Start small, build up. Or, as you said, shoot for the stars. Let's just make it happen. Just bring everyone in. Also, I mean, we've not even touched on Grid Kids, which is another thing. And then this year, you've actually got some pretty young people that have made it onto the Grid teams. So it's very interesting to see.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, anyway, it's been lovely chatting to you guys. I'm aware of the fact that it is now 10 o'clock here. So, yeah, this is the other this is I really enjoy watching the grid matches. I like that, I've talked about this on the show before. I think for me, it's a lot easier to follow that than to watch like the games that is so spread out over the course and, multiple days. Kind of get like one Saturday, get the different YouTube feeds come up. I'm like, okay, I can hear Cassie talking. Right, it's about to go on. So I'll go over to the screen, right, the race is about to start, watch a couple of races, very nice. My only complaint is that usually the last match is probably beginning around midnight for me. So you'll notice my level of like contribution in the live chat slowly diminishes as it gets later and later. And then I'm just sort of, I'm still here. Yeah, I'm here. And that's about all you get. But I do enjoy it. Okay, sorry. Augustus has asked, Mava, what is your favorite grid event? I would say grid race of the different races. And also, he asked a question earlier about if it's always the same. And I would say it's the same mold, but with different things inside. So, you're always going to have a ladder. You're always going to have a mirror. You're always going to have a ringer. But what happens inside will change race to match. No, not match to match. Okay, what is the difference then? So you're going to have like the 4 matches. That's the different teams. Each within the match, you've got the races. But then next month, it's a different match. But what I want to say is that those 4 matches on Saturday the 15th, they are all the same. Next month, it's a new match, and those 4 will all be the same, but they're different from the previous month. That's what I was trying to explain there and really messed up. But
yeah, I follow you. So yes, the matches always have the same races in them, and the races have the same race rules. So how you execute the race is consistent from match to match. The movements within the races change from set of matches to set of matches. So week 1 has a match format that has a single set of what the race elements are, and then week 2 we'll have a different match format that has the same races, same race rules, but different elements within those races under those same rules.
Yeah, perfect. So within a match, you've got a race. Which is for you? your favorite? Two-part question then. Which is your favorite style of race? First of all, of the different races, and then of that style, which was like your favorite ever. So like, so for example, if it was, the ladder is my favorite, wonderful. So which was your favorite ladder? It was the snatch ladder, or it was the 2 deadlifts and a clean. Like, but it better not be the ladder, because as fun as that is, that kind of feels, I feel like that's a boring answer. So what is your favorite race format, Mava?
Yeah, and I'm actually curious in Cassie's answer to this too.
I'm also curious. Oh, don't worry, she's not going to.
Okay, good.
She's also gonna. I'm giving her time to think about it.
So I will say that it's a tough answer for me, because the strategy of the ladder is my favorite. It's insanely strategic if you really dive into it. But that being said, the energy and excitement of the sprint relay cannot be matched, and that's why it kind of caps the match. My favorite sprint relay features the burpee to ring touch, and it's a unique movement, very specific to grid league. And that element trips people up all the time and allows massive lead changes within the race, which oftentimes indicates the winner of the match. So that's kind of like the short answer to my favorites overall.
Okay. No, I like that.
I had the exact same answer, like very down to the burpee to ring touch, because I specifically remember refereeing a match where a team couldn't complete that movement. So watching it ever since, as the seasons go along, has been insane. So it's so funny that you said that, because sprint relay really is like the race.
Yeah, we've had teams sign players specifically for the burpee to ring touch.
Right.
Because like your season can come down to that one movement. If you don't have anybody on the team to do it effectively, you can lose an entire season because of it. So that's one of the cool things about Grid League, for sure.
What is it that throws people off about it so much?
If you tap it too hard, the ring swings and you have to wait for it to be static again. So it's kind of a waiting game, or like a very like intense like aiming game, you know? So you either have to like wait for it to be static again, or have just amazing, like just be tall enough to just hit it from wherever it is, kind of thing. Right. Yeah. So go ahead.
I was gonna say, so the other thing is the fatigue related to the burpee to ring touch is really hard to master. So like people will train so that they can do the 9 reps effectively, but what they end up doing in the match beforehand, and if they miss a couple of times, as Cassie said, then their head starts to get involved. They might miss it again. And then so it can quickly fall apart for somebody that can easily normally do it under any other condition, because of the intensity of the match and, you know, the situation.
Yeah, and it's really cool to watch how intense like people complete it, but are still such like lightly tapping the ring. And like the refereeing on that is crazy, because they're just like looking at the ring, because you have to just see that like very delicate touch, like the ring barely moves, and it's just so exciting.
Yeah. And then it does compound like all the things together, right? So like there's the fatigue. So now I'm jumping and I'm missing the ring. And like I never missed the ring. Why am I missing the ring? Now I'm frustrated. So now I finally hit the ring, and I hit it so hard because I'm just swinging wild. And now I'm in the problem of saying that I'm waiting for it to sort of swing back to an area where I can hit it. Otherwise, I'm swiping again. And it's not just that you're missing the ring, but you're having to do a burpee every time.
Exactly. So it starts to compound really quickly.
I'm sure our dude is really excited about that when he's in the comments saying he's ready for those to show up. So he's very tall. So
I think he's the tallest player in the league. So.
Yeah, he's humongous. I was like, how do you say your name?
Oh, the Palms will pick that for a ringer. Interesting. Oh, starting to cough now. That means it's probably time to wrap this up. You just have so like a burpee to target, but I mean, what's the height of the ring?
9 foot 9 inches.
Okay, so it's high, and then it's a burpee to the tap. But I think, as Cassie's saying, the issue is generally it's a sort of static target, is it? Like on the wall, for example. So you can just jump, it doesn't move. But here you're having to hit it light enough to hit it, but not to move it too much. And interesting. No. Sarah's got 2 hours of work. Can we stay on for another 2 hours, guys? Because Sarah's still working, so she'd like us to Go and listen to one of the old episodes. I'm so sorry. I have to work tomorrow. Anyway, thank you everyone in the comments. It's always wonderful. I'm loving all the grid experts that are in there as well, the different players and coaches and things. So that's been very helpful to answer a lot of the questions that I have. Mava, thank you so much for coming on. Most importantly, because now I can finally say your name, which is really good. Because I'm always anxious and worried before I say that. And Cassie, it's nice to actually be able to talk back when I hear you talking, because usually I hear you talking and I'm like, yeah, that's a good point, and then there's no interaction there. So that's
I mean, I hear you talking. I listen to your podcast. You have a really great community here. So thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, well,
yeah, it's been an absolute blast. And like I said at the beginning, I'm a big fan. I've seen, like, I don't remember how I initially became exposed to your content, but like just seeing the progress from where you initially started and like how you communicate and things has been drastic. And that's one of the things I really appreciate most in people. So big respect.
All right, well, we'll be clipping this bit. This is rare. Usually it's all about the other people. Vindicate will also be checking out Grid. This is what I like to hear.
Good stuff. Welcome, sir.
Okay, Vindicate, I'm very quick. Travis, I'm going to tell you a couple of things very quickly. This is like my little sales pitch that I've been developing over the last couple of shows. And in my experience watching Grid, a few of the things I don't like to compare to CrossFit too much, as I've been saying, but a few things that Grid do really, really well. This year, they've brought in like dual screen. So as you're watching, you will watch both teams at the whole. There's never that moment where the camera goes to the person we think is going to win and we miss who actually wins the event, which is one of our big complaints during a lot of CrossFit events, is sort of we don't get to choose where the camera is. So you always see the action. The different races are very well explained, maybe by Cassie or by Joe or somebody else. Before each race happens, they tell you exactly the format of the race, how it works, what the weights are going to be, what the movements are going to be. Now they've got an overlay as well with like a rep counter, so you can follow it very closely. And the thing I really appreciate is that for each match, it's its separate YouTube video. So you are not scrolling through 8 hours of uninterrupted YouTube trying to find the match you're looking for. You just click the one with the picture of the two teams and bang, that is the match you're going to get. So that's why I think it's an enjoyable experience to watch it actually on the live stream. I think, and from the conversation we've had today and from like the things I've seen you talk about within the sport and stuff like that, I do feel like that's not a coincidence, and that Mavi, you're very keen on making sure it is a viewer-friendly experience. It's not stream first, but sometimes I feel like other events are built for we've built the event for the event and for the people there, and we'll stick a stream on so you can watch it at home. Whereas this feels like watching it at home is great. It's like, yeah, I'd love to be there in person and see it. That would be amazing, but I don't feel like I'm really missing out too much because I'm watching it through a screen. If anything, I think the rep counter and stuff like that is benefiting me. So
yeah, I mean, I love that you said that, because you're absolutely right. Like, we are a digital new age sport for the modern sports viewer, and that has to do with YouTube. That has to do with ease of viewing on a computer, on a TV, on your phone. So I'm excited to hear you say that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I literally had it on my phone the other day. I watched the first 2 matches here, and then I had to travel down to see my family. They're about 50 minutes away, so it was sort of during a break, but then I knew it was going to come back on, so I gave my wife my phone and I was like, right, when it goes live, just click it on. She's like, oh, you can't watch it. I'm not going to watch it. I'll just listen. I'll just hear, follow. And then when I arrived to my family's house, I was like, okay, back on the computer, let's watch it there. So I think I went laptop, phone, iPad. That was
that's awesome.
But yeah, very good. When does Chelsea play next? No idea, Jake. Don't care. He's gonna be at Crash. Great. They are currently courting Travis, I think, in the chat, trying to bring Vindicate over to sponsor the Sharks at this point. Wonderful. Well, I said we were going, and then I did my little spiel on what I really like about watching it. Thank you so much. As always, I say to both of you, Maverick, Cassie, welcome back anytime you want. So just let me know. Thank you, everyone in the chat. I do appreciate it. It distracts me no end, but I love it at the same time. So it's, it's a love-hate relationship. I really appreciate good questions as well. So I like that. I was going to say I'm back next week. And, if you want a little break from grid, we've got Alison Scuds on Monday at 7 p.m. here in the UK, which would be 11 a.m. Pacific or 2 p.m. Eastern. But as we have discovered on the show, she did grid. So it's not that far a departure from grid. And if you're being like, no, we really enjoy the grid chat. It's been great. Well, don't worry, because on Thursday at 10 p.m. in the UK, which is 2 p.m. Pacific, so is that 5 Eastern, we will have some of the South Beach Palms joining us. One has been very active in the chat today. So we have Arta, is it Cabral? Is that how I say your surname? I think so. And also Brielle Macchiarelli. I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with that for the pronunciation.
Killing it.
And Sarah asks, I wonder if Scuds was sad she didn't do the demo team this year. We'll ask her on Monday. That can be a question for us. So thank you, everyone in the chat. Thank you again to Mava and Cassie. And I think with that, we are done.
Thank you